might just do it because at least it's like copy that I can look at. So I like to go re-listen and have like almost a verbatim copy. But anyway, I'll just turn it on. All right, John, do you mind? Because I might have to go. A
Yep.
couple of items. Okay. Yeah. So on the other thing with Diego was FHIR community process. So I have a draft. I'd probably say like 50-ish% complete. I'm going to be focused on that the next couple of days to get a draft to Diego, who is on the panel. So he said, feel free to send me drafts and he'll provide feedback on them. So I think we have all the information necessary for that, but I'll continue to work on that. I'll send it to Diego, get some feedback probably by the end of this week. They meet, the group meets, he said, the first week of every month. So I said, we'd be targeting first week of October, if not sooner, as my goal timeline there. Any questions on that, the FHIR community process stuff?
No, I think that's probably doable. So I was working on the compliance policy part. So you were working on the application part, is that right?
Yep.
Yeah, so sorry I've been dragging my feet on that. I've just had a lot of competing priorities lately. But yes, I think that's a reasonable time frame. It's not that big a thing.
Yeah, agreed. And it even sort of might help with this other aspect here too, since it's this kind of independent group. I'm just trying to like see if those two things sort of weave together with a little more officialness. Okay, so I had that. The other thing was, what's it called? The functional model. So I think it needed some editing. So I've started editing it. I should be finished probably by tomorrow of just cleaning up the copy, the language. So nothing major in terms of like content changes, just clean up. I'll push to that branch on it. And then the one thing we do need to decide is where the linkage is. Like we should decide on this meeting where the functional model gets linked from the rest of the spec. I think those are my only to-dos outstanding.
Yeah, so my opinion, and I always have one, is we should just, at this point, we need to like just minimize the change and just ship this. So I feel as though for now we should have a link to it from the view definition notes, and that's it really. Like I can imagine that it could get further integrated, but I just feel like it's really kind of dragging out us actually finalizing this thing. And this is hopefully the last change before we can actually tag this. And I'm super keen to tag this and get it published so that we can move forward. So my vote is to finish the editorial changes and add a pretty minimal link reference from the view definition notes.
You mean like the view definition, like that main page? I'm just trying to clarify, like the main view definition page would be.
Yeah, like something along the lines of, for more information on how this works, et cetera,
Yeah.
take a look at this page. So it'll be both in the table of contents and it'll also be linked from the main view definition.
Sure. Yeah, I agree with that. I think even like in its own section at the very top, say like, for more information, functional model of this, that totally works for me. Yeah. All right. I'll go ahead and incorporate that into the PR as well. So it'll be all in one.
So does anybody else have any thoughts on that and on the idea that we can finalize this and then we can sort of post a Zulip and say, look, is everyone happy for us to tag this as V2 and move forward from there?
Yeah, I think that sounds good to me. I mean, we should just start calling things like release candidates and maybe taking it appropriately and put that up. And if everyone's good with it, then we declare a release.
Cool. All right. Well, I'm not sure how much other stuff we've got to talk about today. I mean, that was really the main thing for me. I merged that tests pull request. I hope that's okay. It was just kind of dragging on for quite a few weeks now, and I hadn't received a lot of feedback on it. But basically that change to add tags to the tests and stuff has been merged now. So let us know if there's any problems there. We've already talked about the FHIR community process. I think the only other thing that is on the agenda is, Carl, if there was any updates on the OMOP side of things.
So there was a scheduled meeting between me and Devera that sort of got derailed. I had a death in the family and I missed the meeting and we haven't rescheduled yet. But I also encouraged her when we met once, just her and me together, to start showing up to these meetings or sending someone. And I think they meet on Wednesdays, and I'm not sure if it's every Wednesday, but likewise, it would be good if one of us appeared there. And for now, that's going to be me. But the next couple of weeks, probably going to be a little bit more difficult for me than during a usual September. But
yeah, like for reading her messages, I kind of got the vibe that she was concerned that we were duplicating effort in terms of developing sort of yet another FHIR to OMOP transformation without sort of taking their learnings into account and all that sort of thing. I think perhaps the thing that we need to communicate there is that this is not really just another FHIR to OMOP conversion. This is about SQL on FHIR. It's about proving out and improving the SQL on FHIR specification as much as it is. And if we do create a SQL on FHIR to OMOP conversion, then that has some different characteristics than perhaps the other FHIR to OMOP conversions that have been done, because there's sort of a standard layer in there. So yeah, I think that's kind of probably the main thing we need to talk to the Bureau about.
Right. And I definitely, conveyed that when I met with her one-on-one. And I think we'll probably encounter this perspective as we engage with Vulcan, because I think they have no idea what we're doing. And I also think that their scope is much bigger than what they can accomplish, and they realize that. They're also focused on a very particular piece of their entire scope. And I think if we spend a lot of time looking at OMOP, it will look like we are infringing on their turf. But I think, this communication, attending meetings and having these conversations will help them understand that that's not what we're doing. And we might get some good learnings from their knowledgeable people and how to best do it and make it work well with SQL on FHIR. So
I can add a tiny bit of color or opinion to this, perhaps. I did their first string of meetings for 6 weeks or so. They were moving extremely slowly, and they're only focusing on this IPS use case. And in my opinion, they were doing it backwards. They'd sent out spreadsheets for everybody to send in their proposed mappings, but they listed out all the FHIR resource attributes from IPS, like on the left side, and we're asking you to fill in, where you think it maps in OMOP on the right. And I replied back to him and said, hey, you're doing this backwards. Like you need to list out all the OMOP attributes, because the FHIR elements to get there are going to be more complex than just listing a FHIR attribute. There's probably a complex FHIR path expression, for a lot of these things, selecting like the race extension, things like that. And I never heard back from them after that. And I kind of quit going to their meetings. But anyway, what it seemed like they were producing was a very simplistic, this FHIR attribute sort of correlates to this OMOP attribute, without sort of any of the details or anything more actionable than that. Maybe they've progressed in the last several months beyond that now. I haven't really kept up, but at the time it was didn't seem very useful to me.
Yeah, so I think what I'm hearing is we can help them a little bit too, possibly.
Yeah, well, and I'd sent them all the mappings I'd done, which, granted might not have been perfect, but I had all of the OMOP tables filled in for all the FHIR resources. And they never looked at it or didn't do anything with it. And they were still filling in this spreadsheet, and they had 2 or 3 attributes filled in several weeks later. And I'm like, this isn't that hard. What are you guys doing? I don't know. It seemed like they were producing some very general guidance, but not anything that was actually going to help you too much to implement anything.
Okay. Well, maybe the best we can do is make sure that they're aware of what we're doing and, put in a good effort to show up and ask them questions or help them if they have questions. I don't know.
Yeah, so, and this is one of the reasons that I kind of want to get this milestone out of the way, so that we can sort of start making some progress on this. I'm keen to sort of chip into this as well. And I guess my hypothesis around this is that there's some variability in the way you can do FHIR to OMOP transformation. And perhaps SQL on FHIR can actually help with this, in that through the creation of a set of intermediate views that can actually help to generalize that and minimize the work in sort of creating different variations of this. And really the only way to prove that out is to kind of run it through a couple of different scenarios. Like I mentioned, we've got one in a project here that I can potentially use to help sort of prove this concept out. But I can imagine that the views could be common, and it might even go some way to helping what you were talking about, Craig, where you've got complexity on the FHIR side when mapping. Perhaps mapping from this set of views to OMOP might be simpler than just going straight into what's the FHIR element, depending on how you arrange those views. So looking forward to to diving into all that.
And yeah, I'm happy to sort of jump back in and, I don't know, help kickstart that, or at least re-show sort of what I've done if it helps anyone. As I've said before, my implementation is not compliant to SQL on FHIR, but it's similar. Or yeah,
Craig, is that something that's open?
fortunately, it's not. I work for Accenture, and we're not really a product company, and open source here is very difficult to get approvals for. I'm happy to show and share and go into all sorts of detail. I can share all my mapping, etc. Actually,
Okay.
pushing the code to GitHub is sort of the last step that's harder to achieve.
Okay. Well, I'd be happy to take a look at that sometime.
Yeah, you set up a call with me. I can do a full demo.
Okay.
I'll show you the code. I'll show you all the thought process behind it, etc. So
Sounds good to me. I'll reach out to you offline.
Okay, so we don't have much else on the agenda. So are there any other topics anyone would like to talk about?
So there is just this one PR that you saw, John, for the example. So I'm waiting for, I've made some fixes to the publisher tool. One thing that I was a little bit surprised was, so the changes that goes to the validator and in general, like FHIR infrastructure, are they like, I didn't see code reviews and things like that on that. I was a little bit surprised that, those things actually go into the repo without any code reviews. Is that the norm?
It probably depends on who the committer is. Like, it's still so my understanding is it's still a very people-based thing. And by people, I mean like Graham and Lloyd and those sort of people. So yes, it's been a long-standing issue that there's a lack of maturity around the FHIR tooling in general, and the state of like the publisher and all the rest of it. It all works. It supports like a huge amount of activity around it, but it's got some definite problems in terms of single points of failure and all that sort of stuff. So I think it's largely maintained by Graham, and that's just the way it is for now. But I think that it's been talked about for years about how we need to sort of redevelop that whole tooling chain and put a proper process around it, all that sort of stuff. But yeah.
I see. Okay. All right. Good to know. Thanks.
Yeah, but that change looks all good. Thank you very much for that. And hopefully that fix gets in sooner rather than later and we can just merge it in.
Yeah, and I wasn't sure if we need more examples because those like 10, 11 examples all kind of follow the same pattern. So just like, picking elements that are more commonly used and then flattening them. That's all. So I thought that, those two are probably good enough.
Cool.
The other thing, like, just as a side note, so the view definitions that I created were tested against R4, like R version 4 or 5. And then the validator by default, it was R5. So some of the validation failures actually were legitimate, but that was because the location of a field was changed from R4 to R5. So that's why I actually included one example that has FHIR version specified, which otherwise fails with the default R5 validation.
Yeah, so what would be the intended behavior there? So if we had a view definition that said, say, R4, and you're running the publisher in R5 mode or whatever, should it just error out or what?
So I guess there are two things. One is for the publisher. So right now, actually, we get, even for the current examples, we do get some errors. And, I have commented in the validator tool that, there are actually some issues with the validator, some other issues that doesn't crash the validator. But actually in the report, you get errors. So that's fine. I guess we live with that, with those errors. The other problem is, so when you actually want to apply this view definition on a resource, on a FHIR resource, then the engine that's applying the view should make sure that they are compatible. If it says that this view definition is only for R4 and then you have an R5 resource, it's incompatible. It can't be applied.
Yeah, I think we will have to address those errors at some point. But
So for now, I added some to-dos for a few issues that I found. I guess maybe there were 2 or 3 other issues that were not, exceptions and were not failing the tool. The one that was failing the tool I fixed. But the other one, just to give you one example, is that so the validator is not taking into account for each. So for example, if the path can produce a list, like a FHIR path can produce a list of elements, then it says that you are, this FHIR path produces a collection, but you haven't set the collection on this. While if you apply for each as well, then it's not a collection anymore. So it doesn't take into account the for each context of a And there was another issue as well. But
Yeah, well, the other task on the to-do list is to actually verify that the implementation within the IG publisher passes the tests, get a report out of it, and actually get the IG publisher reporting properly on compliance to the test suite, because I'm not sure if it actually has perfect coverage of the functionality, and we need to sort of surface that at some point.
so which one doesn't have
Because we
perfect,
haven't
covered?
Well, I know that Graham has had a go at running our test suite through the implement in the IG publisher, but I haven't seen the results, and I haven't seen that it kind of passes everything in the core functionality. And we don't have that coming through to our test report yet. So that's kind of another to-do item there that is probably should be done at some point.
I see. So the publisher tool is not just like a validation tool. You are saying that it actually can produce like rules basically.
Yeah, it's kind of both, right?
Okay. Yeah.
And it's, yeah, we don't really have tests specifically around validation, but there's a bit of an overlap there. In fact, we could have tests around validation as well, but that's a little bit harder to do, I think. At least it doesn't fit the sort of model we currently have for our test suite. But yeah, as I understand it, the IG publisher is both a runner and a validator.
Okay.
It runs some views inside the IG publication process for certain types of resources like value sets and code systems, and uses that to populate some SQLite database. And then the other part of its functionality is to validate any view definitions that are part. So it's kind of got two sort of purposes in there.
I see. Okay. Maybe at some point I can help with that as well. Now that I know the publisher tool a little bit. Yeah, it took me a while last week.
Yes, that's very brave to dive in there. Okay. Anything else anyone wants to discuss with the group? Okay.
I'm sad I won't be at the work group meeting, but I hope you guys have a chance to get together for those who are going.
Yeah. Okay. Well, if there's nothing else, we might give you a bit of time back, and hopefully between now and the next meeting, we can have a tagged V2 and we can start focusing on what's beyond that.
Sounds good.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. Have a good week.
Thanks. Bye.